Hey there, when deciding how to run your application, it's important to choose the right infrastructure. Otherwise, you will deal with cost, maintenance, or performance issues sooner or later. In this video, we are going to see the different options, some use cases, and some examples of when to use Lambda, containers, or servers. First of all, let me quickly introduce each one to make sure everyone is on the same page. Lambda is a serverless computing service based on events with automatic scaling. In other words, you write a function in your favorite language and forget about servers, capacity planning, load balancer, updates, and maintenance. The upsides are cost effective, there is no idle cost. You pay only for the execution time and the number of executions. Quick time to market, only a minimal configuration is required. Just write the code and deploy it quickly. No maintenance, since it's a managed service, you don't have to keep updating the OS. You only need to update the dependencies of your app, if any. And regarding scaling, you don't need a load balancer, so you can save around $20 or $30 per month and the configuration time. But of course, there are downsides, as with everything in life. There is an execution limit of 15 minutes. So if you have long running tasks like video encoding that take longer or potentially could take longer, then it's not a good fit. Latency. This doesn't mean it's slower than other services, but when scaling up, someone will get the cold start. It's true there are a few things we can do, but we cannot remove it completely. Leave a comment if you want to know what we can do about the cold start in Lambda. And containers, there are a few different ways of services to run containers, like Kubernetes with the EKS service, ECS with ECR, and even Beanstalk service, which can run Docker images. Choosing a container service depends on your use case, but now let's focus at a high level. The upside of running containers are portability. You can run them on different services or even providers. Faster deployments than other app managed services. And I'm looking at you, Beanstalk. Good performance. You can run both low CPU and high CPU intensive apps. And more configuration options than Lambda depending on each container service. Maintenance depends on the service you choose. You can go serverless with EKS or ECS, where you don't need to keep updating anything. But if you go with Beanstalk on a Docker platform, then you will need to keep updating the Beanstalk platform every few years. Unless there is a specific requirement, I would suggest choosing a serverless service for containers. You will save time and operation, and serverless pay off. But container services are not perfect. There are also downsides. You will need a load balancer for scaling. Unless you keep running a fixed number of instances and someone scales manually when needed, which I don't think is a good idea. And running any container service could be more expensive than Lambda for low or intermittent use. And finally, servers, the old way to go, running EC2 servers or VPS with the like cell service. This involves picking an OS, the amount of services, and then managing via SSH. The upside of servers are performance cost ratio is the best value for money, but without taking into account your time, which is a cost too. If you need any OS level configuration for any requirement, you will be able to do so. And the downsides are capacity planning. You need to know how many resources to provide, the OS, the software versions, and so on. And if you make any mistake, you cannot change certain things. So you will need to start from scratch with another server. Configuration. This can be seen as potential good point, but adding this as a downside because you have to configure and install every single software you need. Not only to install, but also to keep updating them over time. And it's hard to scale. Indeed, you can set up a load balancer, but you will need to keep updating the image to be scaled or figure out another way. For me, this is time consuming and error prone. And you will be the one responsible for security, not only for the security update, but also for the security configuration and monitoring. Now let's see a comparison chart. For an event-driven app, Lambda is a perfect match. You can set it up easily with a lot of AWS services and be ready to go live. If you are about to launch a startup or a new product, you don't know the workload or cannot predict it, or if your app has an intermittent workload, Lambda is a pretty good choice for cost effectiveness. At the same time, for time to market, so you can launch sooner. If your team is small or has a fewer resources, then you don't want to keep managing servers. The serverless services are a good fit. So Lambda and container will work. If low latency is a requirement or critical, then skip Lambda. Choose containers or servers if you know what you are doing. And the same thing for CPU intensive apps. Only if you have a specific OS or hardware requirements, servers are a clear choice. Finally, let's see some real-world use cases. If you are building something to resize images when they are uploaded into a S3 bucket, then Lambda is a perfect fit. You will build it quickly, will be easy to maintain, and you will pay only when using it. The same thing if you need to write some cron jobs. It's true that with some container services you can run scheduled tasks, but in my opinion the configuration takes a bit longer than Lambda. If you are building an API, you can choose Lambda or containers. Mainly it depends on if the workload is stable or not, and if a quick response time is always critical. If you are building WebSockets, you can choose both Lambda or containers. I would say here the main point is the pricing, depending on the number of connections and messages. Note that containers will be cost effective for high volume. And lastly, for video encoding or any CPU intensive tasks like AI or machine learning, you can go with container services or server depending on if you really need to tweak the system. Keep in mind that there are different AWS services related to AI. Okay, I think now we have a clear picture of the criteria to pick one service or another one depending on your use case. Please like the video if it was helpful and share it with your team and friends to share this knowledge. Leave a comment with any question, any doubt about choosing a service, if you disagree with something, and any feedback is welcome. Thanks for watching, subscribe, and I hope to see you soon.